So I have this thesis in life in general, that we're not that unique and special. Like, we're all kind of the same. And so if you look at a path, or you look at something that someone's done, or maybe 10 people have done, and they all land in the same place, then know that if you do it, you're probably going to land in the same place. And so first is to step back and say, what am I doing? Have other people done this, and how did it turn out for them?
Today, I'm joined by the magnificent Susan Coelius Keplinger. She is the CEO of Force of Nature and an interesting all-rounder in life. But I won't spoil the surprise. Susan, why don't you give us a few headlines about what you're doing in the world and some of your extracurricular adventures?
Awesome. So I'm Susan, and I'm really excited about helping everyone become their own force of nature in life. And for my business, we focus on marketing and marketing technology in particular, and helping build marketing teams and marketing organizations that can become forces of nature within their organizations. And I really think everyone has it in them to push and to be as big as you can, and to really live a life that has no rules, that lets you think about just the incredible opportunity we all have to be alive. And so I'm an avid athlete. I'm an extreme sports chaser, if you will. I'm a big skier, kite surfer, downhill mountain biker. So I kind of get my kicks off of those activities, and really just think about this idea of, like, how do you push the limits in your organization, and how do you push the limits in your own life? And I think it's pretty fun way to live.
So it sounds like you've got an interesting balance, really, that on the one hand, you've got data, analytics, rigor. And then on the other side, you've got riding down a mountainside at 50 miles per hour, or jumping off a cliff, or, some other extreme activity.
I think they go together, right? If I don't do those activities with rigor, I'm going to hurt myself. So you really have to be, as smart as possible as you go into those types of things. And I think the things that we would profile as being really risky, when you start to break down the components, you can do them in a very safe way. There's obviously always places you can push the risk protocols. And the same thing in building a business, right? Like, you can take big risks that could kill you or kill your business, right? Or you could take just enough risks to build a really successful business where you have confidence in what you're doing, and it feels like it's a, it feels like it's a risk that you understand. And the same, I would say, is true in a lot of the sports I play. There's ways that you can push those risks and push those limits that are going to lead to, fatal outcomes. But you can also make decisions looking at the weather, looking at your equipment, looking at what you're doing in a way that you feel pretty confident that you're going to get down the mountain safely. You're going to get off the water in one piece.
I feel like we could almost, Strategy Shorts is about being short, succinct, and practical. But almost, if somebody was going to take like anything away from this episode, it's how to balance that risk and how to marry going for it with some rigor and some intelligence and some data that might actually get you towards your goals. We could probably just stop recording now, but I'm not going to do that. It's fair to say that you're a bit of a serial entrepreneur. And I noted from your LinkedIn that you're also the founder and president of a brand called Triggered, I think, which was responsible for lots of ad support for brands like Booking.com and Home Depot and Walmart, some really famous brands. So tell us a little bit about that part of your career and how you made the change from that trajectory into Force of Nature as a new business.
Awesome. So Force of Nature is arguably my fourth business. So I've done it a lot and started young. And I think what's fun about starting young is you just become a lot more comfortable with risk, right? And I think one of the things I really think about in my parenting, I'm a mom with two young kids, is how do I just teach my kids those risk muscles, right? So they can be comfortable taking the leap and know that it's going to be okay, right? And so at Triggered, I started when I was 25 years old, and we really went down the traditional Silicon Valley path and thought that was the path that all companies must be built on, which I've learned is probably not true. But, we raised about $20 million or $25 million, I think, between venture capital and debt, and really went after a very big, sophisticated market in the ad tech space, and had a lot of success. We built on the back of a lot of the early days of programmatic marketing. So how do you use data to make decisions about what media to purchase, do that efficiently, effectively? We're very in the early days of that world. And we really invested heavily in the world of Facebook. And so got shot in the back a little bit when Facebook decided to turn off their programmatic platform called FBX. But what I learned from that was, we sold the business, we exited in 2014. And I learned that we probably should have sold sooner, because having at bats, being able to go to the plate and take a swing, to take a risk, right? To try the next thing is really in some ways what matters most versus just like staying at the plate and fouling out and fouling out and fouling out. Like sometimes it's better just to strike out and strike out early so that you can come back and do it again and think differently and use your experience that you've acquired to think differently versus just trying to like stay alive. And the same is true when you're playing a sport, right? Like if you go out and you're having a bad day, you're getting flat tires or your chain breaks or you're hitting mud and you're having to walk your bike, you're hitting snow. You could just come back a different day. Like you don't have to keep trying to hammer and hammer and hammer and really get exhausted in doing it. And so I think Trigget was an extraordinary opportunity, but really changed my perspective on what is business? How do I want to think about business? How do I want to think about, the success that I'm going to strive for in life?
I think that's such a valuable lesson that you don't just need to keep slogging away at something, that you can fail fast. That's a phrase that I hear thrown around a lot. But also, like you say, come back another day. Like if you're facing some elements that are some headwinds that are making your life difficult or a project difficult, take a pause on it. Come back another day. You'll come back with a clear head, a bit more refreshed. The muscles will have relaxed, and maybe something then will give. So I think that's just such an important lesson. And as I guess, a young entrepreneur, when you first kind of got started, what would be, some of your headline pieces of advice for people who were thinking about taking a leap? They've thought about some of the risks and some of the reward, but they're hesitant. Like, have you got any words of wisdom for people in that situation?
So I have this thesis in life in general that we're not that unique and special. Like we're all kind of the same. And so if you look at a path or you look at something that someone's done, or maybe 10 people have done, and they all land in the same place, then know that if you do it, you're probably going to land in the same place. And so first is to step back and say, what am I doing? Have other people done this and how did it turn out for them? And you need to be comfortable looking at the lifestyle that they live, the life they live, and like the reality of those things, because you're probably going to land in the same place, right? Like lawyers are a good example. You should really look at the lifestyle that lawyers live and their happiness levels when you decide you're going to become a lawyer. Because if you look at the life and the lifestyle of a partner or even a junior partner, maybe that looks appealing to you. For me, I was like, oh, whoa, that is not cool. I do not want to become a lawyer. And so I think that it's important to do that. And then in doing that, identify those people who have succeeded and mimic them, right? If someone has made it through and you find 10 people, like, look, those 10 people all made it through. Well, what did they do to make it through? Don't assume that you're going to reinvent the wheel. Like we're not that unique. If you're a young entrepreneur, find the people that have been successful and seek them to be your advisors or coaches, or just read the things that they've written and internalize those things and trust them to be true. Don't think you're going to do something that's different and unique and suddenly you're going to start the next Facebook. I think the playbooks that exist, humans have been around for a long time. Let's not pretend like we're all these special, unique unicorns. Let yourself stop and say, okay, what can I take from other people that they've done that's going to help me do better, that's going to superpower me? And make sure that you're excited about what's required to do that, right? Especially when you're a young entrepreneur, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hours. And what's cool is then you put all those hours in when you're young, and when you're my age, you can use less hours because you're sort of better at it. But I think make sure you're looking at the lifestyle that exists, the work, the reality of failure. Like if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're almost certainly going to fail. It's not a question of it's just a question of when. And you have to be okay with that. If you're not okay with failure, then that might not be the right path for you, the right lifestyle for you. But know that you're going to get more at bats. Know it's going to be okay. Know that, okay, you might start that first company and it might not work, but then I can go and consult over here and make some money and start the next company. Right. And so I think that's that. But that's the reality of entrepreneurship. And you have to make sure you're comfortable with the reality of entrepreneurship and then identify some people who you think are good mentors. Even if you don't know them, mimic what they did. Take what they did and just try to do it again, right? Don't try to reinvent the wheel. I always say, what's my e-bike? I'm a big mountain biker. E-bikes have unlocked so much for me because I can go faster, harder, further, and have just as much fun, right? So what are the things that are going to let you do those things? Are there tools? Are there strategies? Are there approaches that let you do those things in life? And I think often you find those types of things from people who have done it before.
Already, you've said several things that I think we could probably spend a whole podcast episode just focusing on one of those statements. But what I particularly like about what we were just going through is that when you look at someone else's path or someone else's success journey, you can almost extract the data from that process and apply it to your own world. And I know that's going to be something that we're going to be talking about in a little more detail. for every episode, we want to give people a framework or an insight that they can take away and think about, and something they can take away and do. And I think you've got something really interesting to talk us through today, more of an insight about how to maximize the potential of data. So before you dive into that as a subject, give us a sense of who you're speaking to, like who's your target listener for this episode?
I mean, I think this insight really speaks to everyone, right? To all of us, but to particularly people who want to become more efficient, who want to figure out how to be more confident, and figure out how to do things better. And so I think this mental model is really a growth mindset, And so if you have that growth mindset, then I think that I'm speaking to you. So especially in today's sort of connected world, I really live under the belief that the answers to your problem probably lie in your data, right? And so you need to, first of all, the first step is not be afraid of the data, not be afraid of what that says. And in my world, we do a lot of auditing of marketing stacks. And that's really intimidating, like the word audit, like an audit of my MarTech stack. Like, whoa, that's really scary. But the reality is if you want to improve and you want to grow, you need to figure out where you're getting caught up or where things aren't going as well as they could. And in today's connected world, the answers really do lie in the data that exists. And that exists obviously for our personal health. You can see I got my Oura ring, right? I have some sleep challenges that I'm working on overcoming. And this speaks the truth, right? Whether I like what it tells me or not, it tells me how well I sleep. And then I can start to say, okay, I've got the data. I see where I'm having challenges. Now you can come up with what you're going to do about those challenges, right? What kind of experiments can I run in my life or in my marketing or in my business? What kind of experiments can I run to see if I can change that trajectory or change that piece? And so if you aren't afraid of what the data says and you're willing to use that data to figure out where you have challenges, then you can figure out ways to overcome those challenges, and then you can grow, right? And that growth is incremental. You just do a little bit every day. You're not trying to like be transformational and do everything at once. But the first step is to understand and recognize where you're bumping up against a wall.
Okay, so thinking about how we take and apply and think through the data that we can access to inform our decisions and the way we're approaching challenges at work. And like you said, it's something that really can be applied across people's lives. So how they take this into everyday decisions. Is there a particular starting point you'd recommend? So if somebody were to finish this episode and take action immediately, what do you think your recommendation would be and why?
The first step is to capture the data. So if you want to understand what's going on, right, the first step is to start to capture the data. And in business, we would think about that as saying, like, in sales, you need to make sure that you're tracking your sales efforts, everything from the first touch to the close, so that you can understand where you're hitting a wall and maybe falling down. In the world of marketing, obviously, it's making sure that you are tracking the events on your website. So, for example, making sure you've got a pixel on the website to track people's activity. The great news is so many platforms like Shopify, if you're an e-commerce company, make it simple to do that. But you need to make sure that you're capturing the data. Capture what's important to you. So not just does someone land on this page, not just did someone add this to the cart, but did someone do the action or take the activity that I'm trying to get them to take? So I'm trying to get someone to do something, whatever that is in life. You need to capture the data to determine if that's going well or not. And if you think about that in your personal life, if I'm trying to fix my sleep, the first step is I need to understand how I sleep. I need to capture the data. And once I capture the data, I can say, oh, my issue appears to be that I don't have a problem falling asleep. My issue appears to be that I'm waking up after this amount of time. And I can start to think about, okay, what experiments can I run with myself or with my body to help prevent that from happening? One of my biggest unlocks for myself is to take a sauna before bed. So if I take a nice hot sauna before bed, I calm my nervous system down. I sleep better. How do I know I sleep better? Well, first of all, I can just tell. But second of all, the data is captured in my Oura ring, which shows me that I sleep better. And so it's a really simple example of an experiment that I ran, which is like, if I sauna before bed, do I sleep better? So you can think about the same thing in anything in business. Where's your challenge? What's the challenge you're facing? How do I capture the data to better understand that challenge? And then how do I run experiments to try to solve that problem, right? To try to overcome that challenge.
There's almost a discipline that people need to think about here. And it's maybe the discipline to try and step away from your emotional response to the challenge that you have. Because when you've got a challenge and you're responding emotionally, you're overstimulated, and perhaps you are over responsive to the pressure to try and solve the problem. But when you can take some of the emotion out of it and actually just ask a question about the challenge you're facing, like with your sleep question, it's, I'm not sleeping very well. Question number one is, what things can I change in my daily routine that might help that? And then I test one of those things, see how it goes. Test the next thing, see how it goes. Or you might test them over a period of time. But almost when you take the emotion away from it, you take the drama out of the question and you become more analytical, you can then start to identify what's the question and then what are the things that I could do or try to answer that question.
And we all know people who are neurotic about capturing all the data. And I think those people intimidate us. Those people make it be like, whoa, if I don't do everything, I shouldn't do anything. And I would push us to say, like, just take the first step, like capture the first piece. And then maybe you want to capture a little bit more and a little bit more. And then suddenly in a year, you're like, whoa, I'm tracking a lot of things in my business. I'm tracking a lot of things in my life. And it flows and it turns out it's really not that complicated. I think so often when we think about math or science, technology, like the STEM subjects, they're very intimidating, particularly in my world where people majored in marketing because they don't like math, right? But the data that I'm talking about is quite simple, right? Like the things that we're discussing here are not, they don't have to be super complex. It can be like a yes, no answer. Did I sleep through the night? Yes or no? No. Okay, try the next experiment, right? So don't be intimidated by that. It's much simpler than you think. It's typically like simple arithmetic, right? We're not talking like calculus here. And it's just the first step is just tracking, just keeping track. It's like your budget, right? You just need to keep track and keep it simple. And it will become more sophisticated as your relationship with that data becomes more sophisticated. So just take the first step, the first simple step. Don't try to boil the ocean and do everything at once. Take the first simple step and then add the next simple step and the next simple step. And suddenly you've got, a very sophisticated approach.
Susan, that pretty much brings us into land for today's episode. We're just about out of time. Like I said, there was some other stuff that I think we could have really taken a deep dive in some of the other subjects we were capturing earlier on. But I love the simple approach you've given us there to think through data, not be afraid of it, start small, start with the simple stuff. I think it's just so important for me, and I know it's going to really help a lot of our listeners and viewers. But thank you so much for taking the time to come to Strategy Shorts and appear on the show, and let's speak again soon.
Always a pleasure, and what a fun conversation.